I'm going to call this to order. So this is a special meeting of Public Works. It's February 7th, and it's 7:33, and I'm calling the meeting to order. David is on his way. He'll be a little bit late, so we'll have a quorum. So I know everybody, I know Liz, wants to hear what happened last night. How did we do?
We don't have a quorum now?
We do, right?
Do we?
How many are in the
We have
committee?
12 committee.
We have 7.
So,
We're quorum.
Yeah.
so okay, great, sorry.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So, tonight, I actually want to get a lot done, so I'm going to go kind of fast. I'll give you a quick recap of last night. We had, remember these sheets? Oh, you don't remember. Okay, so I handed out these sheets. So on the front of the sheet is the ordinance and, plain talk. And then on the back is how to get to the town government site. And on the town government site, we are going to be posting, or we have been posting, letters that are sent to the RTM email. So last night I printed out 200 of these, and I have 53 left, so that's 147 that I don't have. I don't know if there were 147 people there. We had
I counted about 120.
Yeah,
or so.
I would say 110.
Did you pick up the
130.
file that was outside the door as we left?
No, I didn't.
There was a couple.
So there were some
There
in
were,
there.
yeah.
Either way, that sounds like a great turnout.
Yeah,
Yeah, 120 in this town is a really big deal.
That's a great
A rainy night?
It was a packed house.
It was, I thought it was well attended. We had 72 people sign in, but we had some people sitting before there were sign-in sheets. So, and no RTM, like you didn't sign in,
I
right?
did not.
Yeah, I didn't.
Right. I didn't see any RTM members on the sign-in. We had 28 people speak. We had 20.
I count 30.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got 24 in support, 5 opposed, and 1 ambivalent.
Right. And I wouldn't even say, sometimes the opposed was opposed and sometimes they just had some concerns. So, but we had a solid, you're saying 25?
I said 20. I counted of the 30 speakers, 24 were explicitly in support. 5 were either opposed or saw a flaw with the ordinance that would prevent them from voting for it now. And then 1 was, I think it was Joe Warren said, "I don't care."
Right,
Which
okay.
made you wonder, like, okay.
Okay. You know what, I don't want to keep asking Frank, but do I have anyone that'll volunteer to take the minutes? And Liz just took them. And Frank took them last night, so I need somebody to take the minutes.
I'm struggling along, but I'll give it
Okay.
a shot.
Do you want to do it on there? Do you want a piece of paper? What's easier?
I'll stick with this.
Okay, and Rolf, you send it to me, it's taped, don't worry about it. Don't worry about attributing quotes or anything like that, just the big picture.
Okay. Did we send around a sign-up sheet, for
I
all the people
have
that
it.
are here?
Here's a sheet, and I started it. You double check that everybody's on there.
Thanks, Roll.
Okay.
Take one for the team.
Yes, okay. On emails, we're getting a lot of emails. We have had 19 that are solid in favor. We've had 5 organizations that are solid in favor. We've had 4 no's very solid, and 2 organizations that are, I would put in the pro plastic business, so they're obviously not in favor of this concept. There was some questions last time, and I know the terminology gets a little jumbled, so just like what I just said. So I want to show you. So when they say a recycled bag, okay, so this is, we're going to just call this the flimsy bag. Okay, so this is a bag that by definition is under 3 millimeters. Okay, so this is the bag that we will be banning. Okay, or the ordinance will be banning. The next part.
And how do we identify that bag? In terms of nomenclature, we're calling it the
3 mil
The
thick.
Stop and Shop under 3 mil.
We're going to call it the single use. This is the single use bag, okay? This is what you get at Stop and Shop or CVS or any of those stores. Okay, so now the various ordinances from other towns have various mills that they're talking to. So the lowest mill is a 2 1/4, and that's in Stamford, that's in Westport, and that's it. The
What do you
wet,
mean by that? You mean like it's been banned or what?
no, that's the minimum
A
that
minimum.
they will allow on a bag that's considered recycled. So you know when you go into the store and you don't have a bag, you pay $1 for that bag?
Yeah.
That's the bag, okay? That has nothing to do with this guy. This guy is gone. We're not even gonna talk about him anymore. The only thing you need to know is he's under 3 millimeters,
Right.
okay? So this other bag is a category, and it could go anywhere from 2 1/4, that's the lowest I've seen it, okay, up to 12 millimeter, okay? The BYO group would like the 12 millimeter. Several other towns, such as Greenwich, have the 12 millimeter, and Norwalk, I think, just passed the 12 millimeter.
When you say they have it, they banned it?
No, that is the minimum that they will let a recyclable bag be offered at.
To be recycled, to be used, multiple use?
To be
Right.
offered,
Okay.
yeah.
Right, if you go into the store and you wanna buy that plastic bag, cause it's made out of plastic, that's the minimum, okay? So,
And you said up to as high as how much?
12, okay?
And I'm sorry, just from an industry terminology, a mil is not the same as a millimeter.
Oh,
A
okay,
mil is 1/1000th of an inch
okay, so,
in this context. So 12 mils is 12/1000th of an inch,
Okay.
which, again, it's a thickness measurement, you're absolutely right, it's just not millimeters.
sorry,
I don't wanna,
right, cause that would be really big,
yeah, 12 millimeters thick is
would be, yeah.
shootable with that.
It would last a really long time. Okay, so this was what I found is an example of, it is a Get Green reuse and recyclable bag that you can get from Stop and Shop. This is a 3 millimeter, I think it's 3 even, 3 mil.
So it's a heavier weight.
Yes, it's a heavier weight. Now,
Which means when it does get recycled, it's not gonna get sucked out by the vacuum, right? How do we know
Or
that
if
that's
it's
actually
made
gonna be
with
recycled?
something that's recycled with, or no?
this is reusable, recyclable, and 3. This is pretty much the minimum that
Would
towns
qualify.
are using to qualify when they talk about that recyclable bag, okay? Not the paper bag.
Multi-use.
Multi-use,
And
okay.
since it's mentioned in the state statute, I just want, if you look at the handles of that, and maybe hold it up for the camera or something, right? If you open it up and look at the inside of the handles, they're sealed on by heat,
Right,
So they're heat sealed handles, they're not sewn in as if it was fabric.
right.
Which
Hey,
is a
David.
distinction.
How are you?
Okay, so that's the 3 millimeter bag. Here is an example of the 12 millimeter bag. See, much thicker, okay? It's still made out of plastic, okay? So when you read the state ordinance, you'll see that even this will not be allowed after 3 years if that ordinance goes through. This is what you will use, is something like this, which is cloth. And Frank is right, the cloth, the fact that the handles are sewn in and that it's washable, okay? So I know we were a little confused last time, so I just wanted to,
When you say cloth, is that like a real like canvas cloth? made
this
of
is something you could put in the
cotton?
washer. I wouldn't, because I think it's gonna bleed on everything, but you could, I think, put it in the washer. And that's part of it, is the bag has to be washable, okay? And it has to be made out of something other than plastic or paper, okay?
And the comment last night that I'm interested in, I forget what her, maybe it's Olivia, that she said that Westport had done a runner, like an end run around
Right.
this. Because now they're offering that, can you hold it up, maybe it's
The 3?
the 3.
Right.
So the point I guess she was making was that if we don't put something a little bit higher, that's what you end up with, and
Right.
it's just a moot point.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And even though this says on it that it'll last for 125 uses, I don't think my dog got a hold of it. I mean, it is, it's got a few holes in it already. 125 uses, I think that's
Optimistic.
optimistic.
Broad definition of use.
Yes.
Right.
Doesn't include dogs.
But again,
So-
the reason that 125 is the number is that there's an industry standard,
Yes.
like, that is across, for whatever reason, that was agreed on, right? So that's the degree to which, like, bags are tested now, that's the language in the standard.
Right,
So it's not that the state came up with something new, it's that that's
right,
the language in the standard for reusability.
right.
Nomenclature.
Okay. So
Sorry to interrupt.
no, that's okay. So David, we went through what happened last night, but you were there and you have your, you took your own notes. So I did say that we had, and Frank corrected me, we had 24 in favor speaking.
I counted 24 in favor of the ordinance, 5 against it, 4 serious reservations, and 1 ambivalent.
Okay, and then in emails, we've had 25 emails, no, 25.
I don't think I've seen 25
I thought you
emails.
said 19.
We've had about 30 emails. I have a new batch today.
Okay.
And I wanted to ask you, I know I'm sending you a lot of information, and I can try to star or something what I think you really should look at, but I don't want to not send you something that you might be interested in and that,
That's fine.
so,
The way you're sending it is
Yeah, you
fine.
haven't scared us yet.
so just
I wasn't able to open up a couple of the PDFs, like the Helen Aimson one, which I would
Okay.
be very curious to see what that one actually said, being a shop owner.
there you go.
Thank you.
That was a really good letter,
Or
and
the Jen-
so I made a couple of copies if anybody wants to look at it. This is from the Helen Ainson store, over on the Post Road. Does anyone want to see
I
this?
read it.
You read it?
I'd like to read it.
Sure.
Yeah, if you read it.
So as we discussed, or as I said last night, the email address will continue to take mail until March 1st. And I think that gives people enough time to, if they're interested, to get their comments in. And that way we can incorporate those comments into our thoughts while we're going forward on this. So I wanted tonight to do 2 things really, which is convenient because that's what's on the agenda. So we are going to, I want to get a feel for where our committee stands and where you think your constituents stand. And my personal feeling is that's who we report to, is our
Someone wants to come
district.
in? We have the door closed, we probably shouldn't for a public meeting.
It was
Basketball.
so noisy.
No.
Yeah, I think that might say some of our activity.
It's okay.
Well, no, it's not.
There is a person from Channel 79 here.
Put it up in a crack. No, just so people know they run it. That's good enough.
As long as they jump over the chair.
Yeah,
Bye.
I'll fix that.
I guess I have to wait till Catherine comes back, huh? Do I? Yeah.
Go back.
No, I think it's taken.
Oh, it's slipping? Oh, okay. So I wanted to get a feel for how you feel and how you feel your constituents feel, okay? Because we have to start somewhere, and so let's start with our own group. And then I want to go forward and talk, we can cover a little bit about the state, but that's not on the agenda, so I think we should probably hold off on that. We have a workout sheet from Frank that has the ordinance, and remember I've mentioned a few times those key points that we need to think about? That's what I want to focus on tonight, are those key points. Try to nail some of those answers down so that we can forward our thoughts to TGS&A, okay? So, let's start with Terry. What'd you think of last night?
Well,
You
obviously.
have 3 minutes.
You're gonna.
I'm
I
kidding.
want 3:15, says Bruce. I think it was a good turnout. It was nice. Everybody got the word out, which is good. I'm torn. I'm like king of recycling. Almost got in a road rage fight when some guy threw out a coffee cup out the other day. I want to see all those plastic things gone, but I read the things like a couple of shop owners, about they've got supplies and 3 months, they've already paid for these bags, so that is a concern. I don't want to put any hardship on them. I think it's also important to have a fee on the bag to prevent people, but I'd like to see like $2, really make it work. That's not realistic, and I do think we have to think about the state coming in, and they're gonna look at it as a tax revenue, and if they're already seeing it going to the merchants, maybe it sets precedence, so.
No, they're saying that the money goes, the fees, which are hefty, go to the state, but the The bag fee goes to the merchant.
Right, so for
The
now.
penalties go to
The
the
penalties
state.
go to the state.
Right, so, but they'll eventually find a way to.
You
way
think
to
so?
win. I know so. So, I'm torn on that. I would just like to be able to bag it, and I do think if you're gonna make it with a mill thing, you gotta make it high, cause everybody's gonna do an end around on it. But I don't like hearing comments of others are doing it, so we should do it too. I've heard that, and we should raise our parking rates to match Stamford and Norwalk. I disagree with that thinking along the lines of we spend X per pupil and New Canaan spends Y and they spend more, so we should be spending, it should always be done
Right.
for the cost. So I think the 10 cents is appropriate to cover the cost to the merchants if we're gonna do one, but I think that's a sticky thing, as the toy box owner said, you're forcing me to do that. And then litigation, I just don't know. I don't know how to put that in, but I do think if we have the ordinance, we have to have a higher mill rate on the resellable bags. But I'm kind of torn on the 10 cents. I really don't know what to do on that.
Well, okay, so we have a couple of big points, and the 10 cents thing is one. And I will say again that Frank Kemp and Juliet King from the BYO met with Wayne, and he once again voiced his reservations on
He
this.
being Frank or
Wayne Fox, our town council.
Right.
So he is counseling us against this. So that's something, and he hasn't really moved on
Against
that.
the 10-cent fee.
Yes,
Well,
against
he's
the
not
legality.
calling it a fee, I don't mean to interrupt it, because I spoke with Juliet for a long time about this. Wayne is convinced this is a tax, and it's not a tax. A tax means the revenue comes to the town.
Right.
This is an environmental fee that's being imposed to enable merchants not to be hurt by this ordinance. So it has a totally different purpose, and I'm not quite sure why Wayne is fixated on calling this a tax, which he's correct, municipalities have very limited abilities to tax, but I do think we have the authority to impose this fee. I know New Canaan is thinking of it, they haven't run into this issue, and Norwalk and Stamford has done it already. So I don't think we should let Wayne's concerns necessarily rule the day, or we
Okay.
should force him to really give us authority for why he believes this is a tax.
Well,
Because
that-
he wouldn't do that for Juliet. He doesn't have case law to support him, to support that position.
And that, okay, so that is, in my opinion, one of the biggest issues, because if we get before the RTM and Wayne is asked to give his opinion on this, and he sticks with what he's said so far, it could be a real deal breaker. So it's something to think about.
Mhm.
Another thing to think about, I'm gonna say this now because it'll give you, it might change what you're gonna say. I had a thought on, when I listened to the people last night, and especially the business people, I really feel for them and I really wanna pay attention to them. And I feel like their voices are, they're the people that will be impacted immediately. So here's an idea. They seem to be mostly concerned about the paper bag composition part, and they have this supply of paper bags that they've invested in. So there's nothing to say that we can't change the phase-in period for paper bags and lengthen it to maybe 2 years to give people a chance to work off their supplies. And that will do a few things. It'll give them a chance to use the bags that they have. It'll give the community a chance to not have all of those bags. I thought of this today because I was at the dump looking into the recyclable thing, and I saw a certain store's Christmas stuff, and I said, wow, okay, these bags that these stores have, they're all gonna be in here. So that's not really environmentally a good idea, right? So maybe we give them a long enough time, they can use up the bags they have. It'll give them a chance to maybe, if they have a number of bags they have to buy, they could match up with New Canaan or other little stores and buy in bulk. We'll give them enough time to form those alliances or work out those arrangements, right? And we'll create goodwill in our community, which I think is really important, because not only are these businesses here, but a lot of the people that own the businesses are here, and these pay taxes. Okay, so that's something to just keep in the back of your mind. Okay, so we could work this a few ways. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say.
So the last point I had was the enforcement of it. Even if you read the New Kingdom one you passed around, there were big question marks on how it's gonna actually be enforced. And I think
That's a big
that was a
question.
huge sticking point 6 years ago when it came before us. Who's gonna do it? We don't wanna have to put another, FTE on it from any part of the budget. So that's gotta be fleshed out a lot better. And I like that idea a lot because I really felt like Chamber of Commerce was kind of saying that it didn't really get that full support that was being proposed from the Bring Your Own.
Right.
I didn't get that feeling, so
No.
I think it would be better to get a more concrete input from the business owners and phase in something like you suggested is very good. That's it for me.
Patrick, I know you weren't there last
I
night.
don't
but
have the benefit of last night, but I will. So with that as my caveat, it's a preliminary read, but I'm in favor of legislation of some sort. I think we have to have a fee. I think it has to be high enough. What we're trying to do is change behavior, and people won't pay attention to it. One of the things about the statute that's being considered is that it has to show up on receipts, so that the customer that knows that they're actually being charged to get them to change behavior. So I actually think that it's sort of there to help the business owner. They're already buying bags anyway. This is helping them to recover the cost of higher bags, but really I think the fee should be looked upon as trying to affect changing behavior. I actually think 10 cents is fine. I think 15 to 20 cents. I think it might need to be incremental over time to make sure that this point is driven home and it stays in people's minds. I do think, to your earlier point, that we have to respect business owners. I had not seen this memo, that note from Addison. She makes a very good point. There has to be a way for business owners to get some sort of relief, temporary relief, for reasons that she points out, and give them time to come up with alternatives. So if maybe even a combination of a longer phase in or special relief, or one or the other, but I think we have to do that.
Thank you. So I thought the session last night was fantastic, so thank you again for leading that. Personally, I'm strongly in favor of the goals of the legislation. I'm strongly in favor of the ordinance. And the constituents I've talked to are also in favor of the ordinance. I am sympathetic to the business owners, as you both described. Monica, I think your idea of a longer phase, and I think 6 months is maybe a little abrupt. I do note that we're now in February. If you pass this in the spring, then it takes full effect by the fall, right? So we just got through a holiday season. There may be Darien Sports Shop or Toy Box or other folks who sock away materials for the Christmas season, which is their busy season, and they may have been planning on using that again. So I guess if we're going to pass it in April, hypothetically, I guess I'd say let's give it a 12-month phase-in so that they can go through the 2019 Christmas season knowing what they have to burn off, right? People are already buying, some places are already buying their Christmas toys, Christmas supplies, whatever, because they have a long lead time. So I guess I would say, with an eye towards the local stores, I would think that a longer phase-in is respectful to them. At the same time, and I don't want to sound unsympathetic beyond that, but there is a business risk, there's a regulatory risk, and I think this is something the community is strongly in favor of. And so I think we need to go ahead and move forward without being too slow about it, right? And I think a year is a fine phase-in.
So do you think a year for plastic and paper, or just the paper?
I think the goal of the discussion last night was to get rid of the plastic, and the goal of the legislation is to get rid of the plastic. So we should be getting rid of the plastic.
And so,
right?
So that's another question that was on that list.
Well,
So,
I think let's break it down. Right? I think the goal is to get rid of the plastic. I think we should do that on our phase-in period.
That has been talked about as 6 months. Are you good with that?
So I think let's not have multiple schedules for
Why not?
different pieces, because I think that's going to be just confusing.
Okay.
Right? I would say I would do it all on one timetable, just so it's easy for people to understand you know, there's a before and there's an after, right? And that change date is pretty easy to understand. What happens before and what happens after.
Okay.
I also think, you know, to the point that there was one of the store owners who said that she doesn't have this. She knows of 3 suppliers for paper bags, and none of them do the particular composition that she needs, and it's going to take her more time to find that supplier. So again, I think a longer phase-in time is respectful of that. But at the same time, you know, if someone, I see what Erica Jensen put here in the note from Helen Ainson, that if she's got years and years and years of bags in storage, and I feel like that's an inventory risk that she's taken, and I feel bad to say it, but you may not recoup 100 cents on the dollar on that. It's just not. You can't hold up the entire community from doing what we feel. I don't mean we as a group. I mean we as a town feel ecologically right to do, because you've invested in some bag inventory.
Okay. We're covering the second part of this meeting right now, so this is great. Okay. So I'm going to go back.
And then last, as far as the fee, I think I agree with the prior comments. In fact, I think 10 cents is not really enough of a deterrent. I would love to see a higher amount, because in this town, you know, 10 cents is rounding error. You know, it's
Right.
just a cost of doing business.
And 12 millimeter, or 12 mil?
I think the thicker the better, but I'm not a bag expert. So.
Okay. Patrick, I didn't ask you on the mill.
Yeah, thicker the better.
Okay.
Thicker the better. But
Because I view that as ruling out more and more bags that are thinner,
Right.
right? So, and again, the goal is to get plastic out of the waste stream.
Exactly. Okay. So you're in favor of 1 year phase in for all. Patrick, did you voice to that?
I think we have to be. Listen, my wife's a business owner. She gives, you know, bags for things not in Darien, but in New Canaan. So she's dealing with the same issues, and thankfully, I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue because there's no plastic. But getting the right bag composition, I think we have to be respectful of the business owners. They are under siege from every perspective. And I think that we just need to have a relief valve for them where they can apply for, you know, a special exception. I think, quite honestly, you know, this is a special exception. She buys very special bags, and it costs her. She got $3,000 invested in bags. Yes, it's a business risk, but we have to be respectful of that and have a relief.
Definitely an appeal process.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
there has to be.
Okay, but going back to the other part, so the phase in, once the ordinance is written, when does it become effective?
I think I agree with Frank. It can't be. I don't have any problem with, you know, one date, maybe 2 dates, but I think if we create this multiple of this is going to happen in July, this is going to happen in September, that's going to happen, it's just going to get confusing. Nobody's going to know what to do.
But it's really two different things. It's when you go to buy your paper bags, that's one idea, that's one project you're working on. It really doesn't have anything to do with the plastic part, I don't think.
Well, yeah, but if the
does,
plastic is gonna
though.
be eliminated in
Yeah.
a shorter period of time, you've gotta have something
You got to have
else
something to do.
to do
It's
in
something
lieu
to
of
put-
that bag, because you can't use it anymore.
Good point.
So what's that gonna be?
You're right, okay.
A bag that I can have 6 months later as a paper bag?
But again,
It's not practical.
remember, let's not lose. Well, it's what I think the focus should be. Let's not lose sight of that. We're trying to change behavior. We're trying to get people to bring their own bags,
Great. That's
Right.
the whole goal. Bring your own.
or not use new issued bags. That's the point. So I think we ought to. That should be the goal.
Well, that is the goal, but these are all questions we need to answer. So, what's your phase-in time period?
I think 6 months with an appeal process.
Okay. Okay, and Frank, you said 1 year total?
I would say a year again, just because if people have socked away stuff left over from the 18 Christmas season and they're planning to use it in the 19 Christmas season, I'm sympathetic to that.
Okay.
Would there be any appeal process, as was mentioned
Yeah,
earlier?
it's part of the appeal process.
I guess I wouldn't see it, but I wouldn't advocate for it. But
Most of the ordinances have an appeal process.
okay, so then I'm an outlier. That's okay.
But we knew that.
Take that in the best
I'm
possible
gonna go
way.
back to you. So on the phase-in, do you have an opinion on the timing?
I would actually do a two-part myself, and I would do the sooner the better. As soon as the ordinance passes, you have 3 months to get rid of the plastic bags, and then longer for the thing, at least 6 months, but preferably going through the next Christmas season.
Okay, so 1 year, okay. So Weston is the only town that I have found so far that has a 3-month start date. All of the other towns are 6 month. That's what I've seen. David?
Yeah, having been pretty heavily involved in the Choose to Reuse movement and watching that as from the Board of Selectmen and seeing how that played in the RTM and how it played out in the town, I was really struck last night by the overwhelming support for a bag ban ordinance at this point in time. 6 years ago, feelings were mixed at best. It was a very close call. There were certain people who were advocating very heavily for it, but there were also a large number of people coming out advocating heavily against it. We did not see those people last night. We saw some merchants, but we saw primarily townsfolk coming up overwhelmingly supporting it. You know, as Frank said, there were 29 to 30 people there. Over 80% of the people who spoke were in favor of this. So I think we have to do something. We have to act. I like the BYO Darien ordinance. I think fundamentally it's sound and that we should follow it. I was also struck by a number of the opponents, including, or not opponents, but people who were opposed to the statute, or at least the way it's phrased now, because I think they have a fundamental misunderstanding about how this will work and what the intention is. The intention is not to put an additional burden on merchants by requiring them to buy more expensive paper bags from one source. The purpose is for them to stop having to buy bags at all. Eventually, this will save them money because people will stop using bags that merchants will pay for, and they'll bring their own. So I think in the long run, this is going to be a benefit to the merchants in Darien. Yes, there may be short-term pain, but I don't think it's, I think as we heard from one or two people last night, after consumers pay the 10-cent fee several times, they're not going to do it again. People are just going to say, I don't need a bag, I can carry this to my car, or I have a bag and I'll put it in there. So, I feel for the merchants, I feel for the chamber, I understand where they're coming from, but I think they focus too much on the paper bag portion of this and not the overall purpose of the statute that will eventually eliminate checkout bags entirely. I thought some of the reasons to say no were, a little slim. I mean, we heard one person say this really isn't our problem. Plastic is created overseas, so why should we do anything? We heard someone else say, well, the real problem here is we can't recycle plastic, so what, does that mean we do nothing at all? These are just reasons to say no, and I think we need to find a reason to say yes. So with respect to the bag, I like the 12 mil rate, or the ordinance proposed by BYO Darien. I think basically what they've done is fine. I think the 10-cent charge is a reasonable charge. It compensates the merchants and will help them hopefully get over this period where people change their behavior and start bringing their own bags. And as for a start date, I would choose January 1. That's a traditional start date for many new laws in the state. Hopefully the RTM will act on this at the March meeting, or if not March, in April or June, because May will be our budget meeting, so that won't happen. But this is already on people's radar screen, so merchants know this is coming. I think your wife pointed that out in the email you circulated, that merchants in New Canaan are already planning for this, and merchants in Darien should be doing the same, particularly after what they saw last night with the overwhelming support of townsfolk. So I think a January 1 start for both provisions, both the plastic bag and the paper bag, is more than reasonable, and it gives everyone the opportunity to make their plans and address them and move into the new year, and this law will start with all the other new laws that start. As for exemptions or an appeal process, of course there should be an appeal process. There has to be, I believe, by state law for any fine that's imposed. I am a little wary about creating an ability for merchants to come to the town and ask for an exemption that this ordinance shouldn't apply to me, because ultimately what happens is the exemption eats the ordinance. And I don't want everyone to apply for exemptions and get them, and then all of a sudden the ordinance doesn't have any teeth. So I am not, I don't think that's a great idea, unless it's written very, very carefully, but that's too hard to do in a vacuum like this. it would almost be better to see how the ordinance rolls out and have merchants, come to us with actual problems, and then, we make an amendment to it, or address actual problems as they come, and not do this hypothetically. So, those are my
To your
thoughts.
point, how do we even set up an appeal when we don't know who's monitoring it?
Yeah, how you can administer that?
Yeah.
Well, I know there's been a lot of talk about the appeal process. We have appeal officers right now for parking tickets, parking violations. I mean, there is a system that's in place, and it can be adapted to this. I just don't believe that enforcement is going to be the big bugaboo issue that people say it is, or putting out there as a possibility. Again, it seems to me to be another reason for people to say no. And that, there are people in this town, or groups in this town, that are looking for reasons to say no. I mean, we have lobbying groups like the CT Food entity that are already gathering steam. And there's always some other reason you don't need to do this. Oh, there's going to be state legislation. You don't need to act. Well, there's been state legislation proposed for years, and it hasn't happened. I think, if anything, we've learned that grassroots efforts make a difference. And if enough towns do act, then the state may act. Again, I don't think we should be looking for reasons to say no. I think we need to look for reasons to say yes and get to yes here.
Okay, thanks. So RJ, I'm going to ask you last, so we're going to feel of what we're doing,
Yes.
but we're discussing the ordinance's key points that were on that sheet last night, such as the 10-cent charge, the mill
thickness,
the mill thickness, and the start date, the effective date. Those are kind of the three that we're hitting right now. So, Lindsay, what do you think? Well, and we're also talking about, and thank you, both of you, for handing things out last night. It was huge help. What did you think about last night?
Well, I'm gonna start a little bit earlier than that, because at our last meeting before the holiday break,
Yeah, oh, yes.
you asked us to go
Right.
out and at our holiday parties, like, kind of take,
Yes.
the temperature.
I
So
remember that.
I took that seriously, and I
The
did.
going to the party part?
Yes, going to
Yeah,
parties.
particularly the
I went to as many parties as I could go to.
All for the bags.
Partying with a purpose.
I know.
For the town.
I took a hit for the team. But I did ask a lot of people in my peer group and friend group, and it's just not an issue. This is just not. They're like, why hasn't this happened yet? Like, this is something that either they are already doing or don't necessarily care about, or if they do use it, it's kind of like, all right, okay, I guess I'll start. Like, this is just not an issue.
Okay.
And in fact, it's kind of, I think some people think it's embarrassing that we haven't gotten to this point yet.
Okay.
So that's what I was hearing. This wasn't, not an issue. It didn't actually take that long to ask, because they're like, yeah, I don't even know why we're talking about this issue. Let's go get a drink. So, but last night, I thought was great. I did not expect that many folks to show up, especially in the rain. But I thought it was really good. I thought it was interesting, and what struck me was, and I hope I am very big pro local business, but I hope the merchants heard the voice of their customers. I mean, they're out there and they, are spending their dollars, and they have a choice of where to go. The momentum is there for sure. So overall, though, I do feel, for the merchants, I feel badly for them, because I know they are getting hit from every side. I completely appreciate that. But I think we're all reasonable here to and coming up with reasonable solutions to help them get through this. And if you want to think about it, if it's not coming from us, it's going to come from someone else at some point. So might as well just get ready for it. Overall, like, for some of the amendments, or some of the proposed 12 mils, great, fine, I'm for that. The charge, 10 cents is fine. It could have a little bit more teeth incrementally over time. Maybe, I don't know what you could do, but maybe year 2, it jumps. Year 3, it jumps a little more. Here at 10 cents, it's kind of more of like God, I forgot. It's not actually, in Darien, I don't think it's necessarily going to hit it too hard.
Deter a lot of business.
Yeah, right. So I think, like, we could think about an incremental over time, but 10 cents is fine for me. One thing also I wanted to bring up was, the comments last night that like, oh, well, why don't we starting with plastic, bottles and tabs on milk cartons and all this other stuff. The rebuttal to that, what I heard last night, which was great, is that you do have to start somewhere. And at this point, this has momentum. I think you have to put your flag in the sand at some point somewhere.
How do you feel about the effective date?
I do like the January 1st. It's clean.
I do too.
Yeah, it's just a clean start. It makes sense by the time we get through all this. It could be January 1 anyway. But it allows merchants to get through the holiday season. And it's a date you can remember. The other thing that I thought was that I took notes about, that appeal process, I agree with you. That could be the loophole, if we are not very explicit about that. And I don't know how to do that. But that is something that I think, of course, we have to have. But I agree with you. I think, like, let it roll and see where the complaints come from, and then deal with it as it comes. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing I thought, which I wanted to say, was that there could, and obviously this is not something you would put in an ordinance, but like I heard last night that I thought was pretty cool at Greenwich now, it's kind of almost fashionable to carry around your bag, and so if you're going into a store like a Brown & Co., you wouldn't even be given, you would just have your canvas bag, and that's where you would put your goods. So, BYO wants to, support this and other groups by having a campaign at the same time, trying to get folks to think that you just don't need your recycle bags for Stop and Shop. You should be carrying it around town or something along those lines. So,
Fantastic.
Perhaps the town can create their own branded bags and sell them. It'd be a revenue measure.
Ooh.
Town of Darien bags.
yeah.
Well, their BYO.
They wouldn't get a lot of use in New Canaan.
That's true.
Yeah,
They might.
BYO is having a contest. They were having a contest for designing a bag, so that's the next.
Choose to
stage.
Reuse did that as well.
And I love the comment from the real estate agent. Like, I kind of wish he went into a little bit about like the demographic that's coming in here, and of course showing them the beach and whatever. But what are their tastes and trends? Are they folks that are really super into the environment, or like what could they have told us a little bit more about that? That would have been an interesting view to see, like those that are coming to buy here. I know families are coming here to buy for the schools and staying for the beaches, but are they also what are they also?
What's their makeup? Yeah.
What's their mindset about this?
So you like the January one? Okay. Peter, are you ready, or do you want me to come back to you? Yeah. Okay. Liz, what do you?
I was not able to be there last night, but I do have thought on what I've heard tonight, and I'm very much in alignment with what's been said already. I think that, to Lindsay's point, I think a lot of people are like, what? We don't have this yet? I mean, of course we know we don't have it yet, but I mean, the time has come. I mean, I think culturally we're there. Anybody who shops at Trader Joe's knows we're there because very few people, use bags there. And I think to the extent that people come to Darien with, talk about people who are moving here to purchase, I'm a realtor. I mean, there is a value set that comes with, I'm living in the country, I'm going to be near the water, I'm going to be living this sort of, healthy, environmentally responsible life. I mean, I don't think it's inconsistent that we have a ordinance that protects us from, from all of this plastic. And, it's like, let's not let the tail wag the dog. It's like, we get it. Like, let's do it. The major offenders are Stop and Shop, not them specifically, but big grocery chains, farmers, CVS. If we just cut that out, we're going to be so far ahead. And I think there's going to be a lot of peer pressure to do the right thing. I mean, I think people want to do the right thing, and they're going to notice when somebody isn't bringing their own bag or whatever the case may be. So I think January 1 gives everybody plenty of time, frankly. You know, any operating small business in town must have seen the writing on the wall at some point. This is not new news. And, you know, 10 cents, I don't think that's going to be a huge deterrent, but it will be a reminder that, yeah. So everybody I talked to, I haven't heard anybody really object to it. I don't think it's going to be that big a hard sell.
And the 12 mil, you're
Yeah.
good on? Okay. Ralph, what are you thinking? What'd you think about last night?
Well, yeah, clearly there was very substantial turnout of people, and the sentiment certainly is, you know, to ban the plastic bags. And so I think, yes, we should go forward with doing that. Where I hesitate, similar to some of the people who spoke earlier, is the impact on the business owners. You know, it's not just the business owners that are here today, it's also business owners that are coming in tomorrow, and we're expecting a lot of them with the developments that are planned and approved. So we have to keep that in mind, that, you know, we're trying to welcome business to come to the town, so I don't want to make it difficult or onerous for business owners or potential business owners to consider Darien, because we are in competition with many other towns in the area for those business owners. So I don't want to be, certainly I don't want to be any more onerous than any other town is to business. Okay. One of the things that I thought I heard, and of course you can all chime in and correct me if I heard it incorrectly, but a number of the business owners took exception to the paper bag and it being a 40% recycled material bag. And that there was one in particular, as I recall, felt that that was a very costly bag to source. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm concerned about. Is I'm very uncomfortable putting regulations on the business owner that not only says, well, you have to have a paper bag now, but you also have to have this paper bag. And this paper bag may have limited sources and may be a more costly product to purchase. And that's taking it, I think, several steps beyond just, okay, you gotta have a paper bag or a paper bag that can be recycled. So that's clearly one concern that I definitely have. And I need to maybe research that a little bit more to get clarified on whether that's really the case or not. Is it more expensive, so on and so forth. From some of the reading I've done, the 40% is also considered for the fact that if you have any more than 40% recycled paper material, the bag simply won't hold up. It'll just fall apart. Okay, so that's certainly part of it, as I understand from some reading I've done about it. The other thing that I would also be, I think, consider is that this whole ordinance should have a renewal date. In other words, I don't necessarily am comfortable passing this ordinance that would go ad infinitum forever and ever. I think there should be some timeline to it, that in a period of 2 years, 3 years, something, after you've had a chance to see how it in fact works, that we revisit it. And either we say, okay, it's fine, we'll continue on, or we found some false parts to it. Maybe we should revise the ordinance to some extent in consideration of what we've learned over the last 2 or 3 years, and I definitely would like to recommend that.
So like 2 year or 3 year?
Well, I mean, we can talk that out.
Well, Rolf, I mean, in fairness, we as a body can always say,
Can always change.
Yeah.
hey, we did something last week and we see implications that we don't like. So we can always modify what happens. I mean, we can certainly put it on our committee's agenda, review this in 24 months, and I'm sure that whoever succeeds us, whether some of us are in this group or not, will take that seriously. But I would be very concerned about having a sunset clause in this ordinance where a merchant thinks, well, I get a phase-in time to burn off my inventory, I have an appeal process so that I can see if I can circumvent it, and the whole thing's gonna sunset in 3 years or 5 years. I just gotta,
Well,
right, I mean,
yeah, I wouldn't-
that doesn't say that we're committed to getting rid of bags. That says
I appreciate your point, and it's a point well taken.
I would also be concerned that the RTM is not always the most nimble of bodies.
Okay, well, you have more experience with that than I do.
So I'd be afraid to have a set date of a sunset clause, and maybe executive, the rules committee isn't focused on it, or, and all of a sudden the sunset clause date comes and it goes, and the RTM hasn't acted.
So far we
And
have,
in terms
Right.
of trying to keep the business people in mind, what they really need to know is like, what do they need to know? So
Right.
that they can plan and they have some certainty and they can do their business planning and forecasting. I mean, you look at what's being built down in Sono, don't you think those merchants are all like, what's the deal in Norwalk for my bag situation when I'm just about to open up, 40,000 square feet of retail space? So I think that if we really are trying to be competitive about getting people in town, they need to have very clear guardrails on what is expected of them so that they can do their business plan.
yeah, the only town that has a sunset is Greenwich. It has a 3-year. And the BYO group there is happy with that because they did not get the 10-cent charge they wanted. They actually wanted 25 cents and they didn't get it. And so they feel that that's going to be another opportunity to get the
Go after
fee
the fee.
incurred. So, yeah. So that's the only town that I know of like the 7 that I've kind of looked into. And to your bag composition point, every ordinance that I've looked at has the same wording on the bag composition. So I don't know what the reasoning is there, but
Yeah,
it's
that's really what I'm asking.
consistent. It's been
Fine,
consistent.
I appreciate the consistency, I just need to be more comfortable with how do they arrive at that number? What are the true costs of those bags? Is a 10-cent reimbursement in fact gonna cover the difference for the merchant?
No, it's
Okay.
14 cents.
Okay, so there you go. So the merchant, we know, we're sitting here right now, we're already saying, we know for a fact that the merchant's gonna have an increased cost.
Well, so
So-
the merchant's going to, but that's assuming that everybody that used to use plastic now uses the paper.
Precisely.
So you have
Exactly.
100 bags that you sell, that you use in the store, and you have 50 that are paper and 50 that are plastic. But what's gonna happen, I think, is that it's going to switch and you'll have people bringing their own, and so you could look at it and say the stores are gonna end up saving money. Okay, I am a glass half full kind of person, I get it.
I don't know that anybody can accurately predict how it's gonna all
But,
shake out.
but in the, in the perfect world, everybody would bring their own bag, and then the stores wouldn't have to buy any paper bags, so they'd save 10 cents every time,
Great.
Well, let's
So
not
there
forget
is there is that.
bags are also advertising. So
That's
some
true.
merchants, like to use the bag, and like their bags to be seen. And for them, the increased cost, if it's 14, it's 4 cents or
Yeah, it's
50 cents,
So,
That's
so
okay.
according to the BYO, it's 14 cents increased cost per bag. But to your point, I mean,
Right.
that was one of the things.
So Rolf, I just wanna get on the record, so on the 10 cents, are you in favor of the 10 cents? Okay, and I'm just gonna preface this again by saying that our town council is concerned about the 10 cents legality issue. So we will have to address that, but I am trying to get it on the record. Okay, I'm gonna come back to that one. 12 mils okay with you?
Yeah, 12 is
Okay.
okay. The other thing I'd like to point out also is that for the near future, the paper bag is gonna be the go-to for the store owner.
True,
Okay.
yeah,
And one thing I think that some people were trying to make a point last night was about the fact that the amount of research that goes into making paper bags far exceeds what it takes to make a plastic bag. And so you're
The resources.
trying to going, yes, everybody's supposed to get reusable bags, but in the meantime, we are gonna go from,
right,
in my opinion, the frying pan into the fire.
right,
Okay.
and they result in more waste.
Yes, they're
Right.
worse in numerous levels.
right,
Okay, water,
everything.
When you discard paper, there's more waste than one of those plastic bags
No, but for the water.
as volume.
Yeah.
As
And
volume.
volume, but you
and
just
to
mentioned.
make a
No, it's to,
No, no,
to
no.
make them, it's
Requires-
I was just
all kinds
asking,
of resources.
because you mentioned that it's worse to the water, Ralph mentioned that, and whatever I have read tells me that, yes, the carbon footprint of a paper bag exceeds the plastic bag, but then there's also some conversation about, regional, but I'll keep that out of it, it has to do with plastic doesn't have to be sourced, paper is, petroleum is everywhere, paper is not necessarily. And then the second thing, was, yes, volumetrically, it's more, but then it composts. But the plastic doesn't. Volumetrically, it's most, but it doesn't harm the water supply. but the plastic will for the next 10, 100,
Right.
1,000 years basically.
Right.
Um,
Right.
And so I just hate this false comparison. There's no doubt that we are taking one evil and replacing it with a lesser evil.
I agree.
I
Okay.
feel like it's like when, as a country, we decided to say that gas was green. We all know gas is not green, but it was better than oil. And so I
Better
think
than
it's
coal.
that,
Better than coal.
and definitely better than coal. So it was that whole, oh, well,
That's a good point.
it's,
Right. I
Okay.
mean, to Arpita's point, the carbon comparison between paper bags and plastic and the cost comparison doesn't take into account the after effects of plastic,
Right.
and the cleanup costs. And I think
Right.
someone made that point last night, and I thought that was very well taken.
Well, so going back to you, the enforcement period, how do you feel about that? So once the ordinance
Well,
is written.
I mean, I
it's-
understand you're thinking about January 1st, but the unknown, as far as I'm concerned, is we don't know when this is really gonna get to the RTM and when it's gonna be approved.
Well, we are,
Okay,
we
for all we
are,
know, this could drag later into the year, and
no,
and would shrink that window for January
Okay,
1st
that's
to
a
be
good
very,
point.
very, very small, which is, not exactly what we're trying to do here.
that's a really good point. So, okay, so let's think this one again. So maybe we have preferably no later than January 1st or no sooner
yeah.
than 6 months
Months,
or 9 months.
January 1st, if
6.
it falls within the
I think
6-month
that's very
timeframe.
doable.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, from the
Okay.
time that it's approved
so
by the
minimum
RTM.
6 months up to January 1st.
Right, and so what that means is that we have an RTM meeting in mid-June. We're hoping to pass this in March. If we don't pass it in March, we'll pass it in April. If we don't pass it in April, then we're probably not gonna do it in the budget in May.
Right.
Then we have another shot in June, right?
That's
And
our
that,
due date, right here.
that allows us to say, well, we can fumble the ball a couple of times, right? And even if we pass it in June, it still is more than 6 months. It still gets us through the holiday season and still is, to David's point, synced with the other kind of ordinances.
In the meantime, retailers are already gonna start sensing what to do.
They're
and
on
They're,
board.
they're, they're prepped.
Yeah, any
Okay.
retailer who hasn't taken last night's meeting as a signal that they need to start changing their supply chain,
It's happening in other
that's,
towns.
yeah, I'm not,
Okay, so January 1st or 6 months minimum from the
May
implementing.
I
Yes.
have a
Okay.
suggestion for
Wait,
this
1 second,
proposal?
wait, I'm just gonna write this down and we're gonna come back to, okay, so the group that's already spoken, do you agree with that?
That's fine.
Okay, and do you agree with that, Ralph?
Just repeat it one more time.
Okay, so it's gonna be a 6-month minimum,
Right.
preferably January 1st.
Fine.
So it should be more than 6 months, okay, Liz? Okay, so Arpito, so I'm gonna ask you the mill, the 10 cents and that, okay?
Okay. So I was actually quite surprised to see the turnout last night because we had thought that with the rain and the weather. So that's really good. To your point, thanks for reminding that because it feels like the holidays were ages ago. But I did the same thing. I asked everybody. And the only one question that I got was, but we tried to pass it a few years ago. What happened? Is Palmer's on board? It was kind of funny. It was a 2-part question with that same thing. And I did tell them that, there has been back and forth, and it's my understanding that they are on board with the present, the way it's written now. I'm perfectly good with mill. The data suggests that that is the right way to go. The 10 cent per bag to me is very fair, and I want to put it on record that because it's a 14 cent or that kind of a charge over what is being used now, with even a few bags, even if you reduce 50% or a third, actually not even 50%, a third of the bags that the merchant has to give out, that will become a wash or better. And also I already made that point that even though paper is bigger on the carbon footprint, I think we are not talking about just the carbon footprint, but what's going to happen to Long Island Sound and the woman who spoke about Lake Michigan. That's a strong point. My family back in India, they talk about not just water sources, but even entire lands that have been irrigated with those water sources and now have such levels of toxic in the fruits and vegetables they come out. One of them in particular is watermelon, that you can't eat it in a lot of places because of what's happening, because it has such a huge water content. So I'm for reducing microplastic. That's a very scary word to me personally. And then the last, like as a business owner, I do feel the pain of some of the businesses who've bought in bulk, because I mean, it makes financial sense to do that. And, you know, sorry, one second, I'll pull up the name of the person who I had her letter right here. Erica Jensen, she wrote the letter talking about, you know, she has, you know, tens of thousands of bags sitting, kind of a deal, because she orders them and that. My suggestion would be, because the 1st of Jan is so close to the holiday season and all retailers are really busy getting all of that together, I would actually say if we give them till March 1st to transfer over, that means that, you know, they can check that inventory of bags that have been used over the holidays, not feel the pressure to have more bags sitting during the holidays, and then order more bags to be delivered for March. And also in terms of sourcing, they might get a little price break post-holiday season. And if you're putting in that 6-month thing, it'll kind of make it clear if you've not passed the legislation by June, you know, that's not happening anyway. So that was one of my things, because the holiday season for the small business owners tends to be pretty stretched out, and it starts pretty early. So I think moving it to 1st of March might be.
So you want the whole effective date to be March 1st, including plastic? Okay.
I mean, so, you know, nobody's gonna go out and buy new bags if they've finished it, but that's like the.
Okay. Okay, super. Okay, wow. Okay, there were a couple of others, so, which I'm happy that I didn't give you all of them to think of at one time. This is an ordinance that Frank drew up.
Kemp.
And Frank Kemp, and it's got kind of the basics, and we're filling in the blanks. So that's what we did tonight, is we answered some of the bigger questions that are on here. So I know one of the, I'm missing a few. Okay, so okay. Two things let's go, we're gonna go back through the room one more time, and there'll be 2 more questions that I can think of right now. One is the fee for non-compliance. So, the state fees are seriously hefty. The ordinances that I have seen, they're all pretty similar. You get a warning initially, and then it's a $150 fee, and then $250 for the second and any subsequent. Does anyone have any comments on that? Is that okay? Do you want to see something different?
I mean, in terms of process, not the fee, but the process. In other words, you're asking if we agree with the first should be a warning, second should be a penalty.
No, well, okay, we can start with that.
Was that your question?
No, my question
Where
was.
is it on here? What number are you referring to?
I just know it off the top of my head,
okay.
it's a question that we had, it's just like we were going through these. So when a store isn't in compliance,
Right.
the BYO draft has a warning for the first time, it has a $150 fee for the second infraction, and a $250 fee for the third and any further infraction. Does anyone have any comments on that? Frank, I'll say you first. Liz?
I'm on the blight committee,
Uh-huh. And you love it.
and
You
we're
volunteered, Liz.
talking. Frank can't put me up to that. And we're not talking about hundreds of issues. We're talking, you know, we track maybe 20 properties at a time.
Uh-huh.
And we have a blight officer who is spending, I'm gonna say, in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 hours a week on that process. It's not insignificant to keep track of and document the warning and the fee imposition process.
Uh-huh.
And unless we have some support to execute that, you know, that whole unfunded mandate issue comes into play. And I think there, as I said earlier, I think there'll be a lot of peer pressure to do the right thing. I think from a PR standpoint, for especially the big chains, it would be a very dumb move not to participate. but I think it's naive to think we're going to be running down every small business that chooses not to, you know, stick
I envision
with
zero
ordinance.
revenue from these fines myself. So what was your point? From a,
I guess my point is that you can talk about the fees and who's gonna write the letter, who's gonna tell you where you screwed up, who's gonna, you know, I mean, who's gonna track all of that to have a case to be made to impose the fine? I would imagine the fine is going to require some documentation for it to be.
so would you prefer no fine? Would you just prefer this to be a voluntary?
No, but I think we're gonna have to put some, we're gonna have to back it up with support if we're going to have a fee.
Right, we have to, yep. And if
And
we
I
have an
think we
ordinance,
will-
we need to have, enforcement. Even if we never enforce anything, we still have to have enforcement, so that's another sticky point. David?
Can I just want to respond to the term unfunded mandate, because you just used it, Liz, and I've heard other people throw this around. I think we need to remember that we are the taxing body for the town of Darien, so it's not an unfunded mandate if we decide to do it,
Correct.
right? I mean, this is not like the
So we
federal
need
government saying that
funding.
states or towns must do something. So we can enact an ordinance and say this is what needs to be done. If the Board of Selectmen doesn't put it in the budget, well, shame on them, and that'll be another discussion for another day. But, because I think given the widespread support we've seen for this this ordinance within the town, people are gonna be upset if we pass it and there's no one to enforce it, if enforcement is necessary. So, but I think we gotta get away from calling this an unfunded mandate, because it's really not what it is, and that has such a pejorative tone in this town,
Right.
that, you know, we should remember that we are the taxing body, this is our town, this is our ordinance. If we decide to do it, we'll pay for it. We're not asking someone else to pay for it, okay? So, and, you know, I think with.
So it will come at some sort of cost.
Right, but I
And that's
can't
fine.
believe,
I
I
don't have a
can't
problem
believe
with
that 100% of our town employees are fully engaged 100% of the time, 300 and whatever days of the year that they actually work. That we can't find somebody who's already on staff to receive complaints and investigate them. I don't think we need people to go out, you know, as an investigator, like, you know, snooping on stores to see if they'll comply or not. I think given the support this ordinance has, people will complain. You know, we'll get calls and say, this store is not in compliance, can you go check it out? Someone will have to go over there and check it out and write a citation if that happens. Now, hopefully 1 or 2 citations, that'll be enough, because I think, as you point out, that peer pressure will be enough to.
I don't disagree
get
with
people
you
to
at
stop it.
all. I'm just saying there will need to be a process and
Oh,
accountability.
exactly.
That's all I'm
So I
saying.
mean, as
Somebody's
Terry,
gonna have to do that.
Terry was concerned that there would be new FTEs, and I just don't think that's gonna be the
Okay.
case for this.
No, because it's not gonna get passed, nobody's gonna pass, we're gonna put $5,000 in the budget to have somebody go check on bags in stores. I think it will be.
I don't think there's
peer
gonna be a line
pressure, but
item for
there needs to
that.
be a process, the dedicated, you know, specific, okay, is it gonna be the health commissioner, or whoever it may be?
Right.
It has to be spelled out before you start talking about fines. What is the process?
But we
Where do you go?
have
Well, and we can
ordinances
do that.
already in this town that
Right.
impose fines. That framework is already there in our code of ordinances. It's very easy for TGSA to take that framework and superimpose it into this statute.
That's
It's just a
what I'm
matter of
saying. It
deciding
needs to be in
who,
the-
right, of
it's gotta be
deciding
in there.
who's
It's
the
gotta be
effective
specified. It's
officer
gotta be
is.
specified. I think everybody-
Or else it's a
is everybody-
no-go.
Right, but that's just
Yeah.
cutting and pasting.
Can I ask, like, so when, you know, I
Well, it's never
always
done.
get this in the paper or online about like the health commission goes around and who got a bad mark. That naming and shaming is enough. Like, couldn't you maybe think about not fining, but doing the old name shame game? Like, it gets, you know, it gets put in, I mean, seriously, I don't really know, I don't
You
know.
get
what-
posted.
You get
Yeah.
posted, like that, you know, here's, you got your grade. And maybe you get your grade, which is a really good one, and it's awesome, and then you get a really bad grade, and people know about it.
Well, I think on the grading, this will be a pass-fail situation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm sure the merchants probably would hate that, but, you know.
Yeah.
For sunset.
Yeah, so I think, David, I guess I agree with you that we already have a structure in place. We certainly need enforcement. This is not an unfunded mandate because we're the ones who are mandating it, right? So we're gonna put it in our process. We're gonna allocate money for it. I guess considering how much pressure we do put on the budget, I do expect that at this point the departments are probably pretty lean. I guess I'd personally be surprised if we have a lot of wasted time and human resources that's not utilized at this point, because over the last several years, and I mean going back,
The budget.
multiple administrations, we've been squeezing the departments at every step along the way. So I wouldn't think there's a whole, but again, with 80% of the people coming out and saying they're in favor of this, and some people very, very emotionally, I think we as a town have to be willing to kind of fund the things that we think are important. And if we think this is important, we need to be ready to fund it. And if that means that we need 15 hours a week for somebody to kind of check on this sort of thing, or if we want to make it a voluntary, where citizens report it in and then somebody reports. I mean, I guess I think we need to be prepared to enforce the laws that we think are important. I think this is important, and I'd be ready to spend money to enforce it.
Would you be ready to volunteer?
To volunteer? I would not be ready to volunteer.
We'll give you a badge.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm gonna go around and ask everyone that. No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
no. Well, look, I mean, there has to be somebody who's like, just there's a blight officer. There has to be someone who's dedicated who's responsible to either do inspections.
Yeah.
And I agree, David. We don't want Inspector Javert going around like I got you with a plastic bag, somewhere. But again, if there's a call this number at town hall if it doesn't come out of your receipt or it doesn't if someone gives you a bag that doesn't comply.
So who's in favor of some sort of a tip line?
Well, we already have one.
Right.
It's right on the town hall website. If you want to report a problem, you want to report an issue, or so we don't have to, there's no creation here. It already exists.
Yeah, it's just
Does
funneling
everybody
this.
agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
It's funneling this complaint among the hundreds of other categories.
Potholes, sign down, bag.
Okay. Okay.
One more thing
And
to
to your point, I believe that if you give a town employee additional responsibilities, under the union rules, you need to pay them more. So this will have to be paid for.
Right.
Okay.
And we shouldn't be afraid of that.
All right, so let's go back to this fee thing.
But I take issue with that because I don't think that we have to necessarily give this responsibility to, or mandate that this responsibility be taken up by an FTE or somebody who's already employed. Traffic violation or parking violations are done on a volunteer basis. We have a volunteer traffic officer or a parking officer who does the hearings. There's no reason why we couldn't follow that model and do the same thing. If that becomes overwhelming, then we kick it back to town hall and say we have to come up with another process, which, to Rolf's earlier point, might actually beg for us revisiting this in 3 years to make sure that it's working the way it should. Maybe it doesn't have to be a sunset clause, but maybe somehow that if there's a mandated review by a certain thing built into the ordinance that says the Public Works Department or wherever this comes under, undertakes a review. Not Public Works, but I mean
Okay.
I mean the Public Works Committee or something that does a review in 2 years or 3 years. That's a
Okay.
good point.
Okay. That hasn't been mentioned yet.
I
Okay.
like the 3 years, just because it gives time for behavior to change.
Yes.
They're really slow to change, so the number of bags that are used in year 3 will be a pretty good indication.
Right.
Okay, so
I
people.
don't know how you write that into the ordinance, though.
I think that's just a suggestion. How's that?
Yeah, or,
Okay.
yeah, right, or it's just something the rules
No, what
committee
you
needs
had
to be.
mentioned, David, that, did you mention earlier that we could go back in 3 years as a committee to look at it?
Yeah.
Go back anytime.
Can go back
Yeah.
anytime.
Yeah, I think it's
So-
incumbent upon this committee to, at some point, just take a pause and look back at the ordinance that was passed, whatever, 2-3
Yeah.
years ago and say, does this still work?
Right. Right. And I think that's a natural. I think that will.
Who's going to put that in the calendar? I'm
Monica.
serious. I mean, process-wise.
There's Google, we can put it in the calendar right now from
Are you
3
going to be on
years.
this committee in 3 years?
I don't know, but I let the
Okay.
people on the committee know that was on my calendar from 3 years ago.
Okay.
And it'll be in the minutes, but I do think every year would be a good checkpoint for 3 years, so you can see a pattern, not just from here to 3 years, but did it work over time, or was it immediate and then just never changed? So I think a review.
Well, written into the blight ordinance is an obligation to submit a report at the end of every calendar year that says,
Right.
give us a summary of what's been going on, how many complaints, blah, 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 and maybe something that obligates them to do an annual report.
Yeah, that's what
would be
the
a
other
start.
ordinances
Yeah.
have. They have a request for that or a stipulation on that, so.
Yeah.
One point that had come up in a couple previous meetings is that another town, to your point about volunteer, there is a volunteer group that does the enforcement. I'm not sure which town that is, but certainly, like, there's obviously a number of environmental organizations around here that, you know, care about this pretty deeply. I don't know what that, do you guys remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know which town it does, but it is a volunteer, maybe it's Greenwich.
That's what.
So, something to, think about, maybe it's.
Greenwich has.
There has to be an empowerment though.
Greenwich
from
has
the
an
town.
enforcement
Right, yes.
conservation commission that does the enforcement, so.
But I
Okay.
also think,
We have
given
an
how many
EPC.
kids, how many high school kids are also coming and with their shopping patterns, I wouldn't be surprised if they start taking photographs and posting it on Facebook. You know, it'll only take 2 of them to do that, and then it'll become a pattern to enforce.
Okay, we do have to nail down this fine thing,
So
okay,
I think generally the state law limits how much municipalities can charge as fines.
Okay,
That may be where the 150 and 250 comes from. I think the amounts were lower like 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
okay,
So I don't know that we can charge more than that.
okay,
I think if that's what these other towns are doing, that's probably the maximum the state allows.
okay. So you're okay on that?
Yeah.
Is anyone not okay on that? You're not.
So my only concern is, I think the fine structure is fine. I think my only concern is what counts as a violation. Right.
Yeah, that was
I
my
mean,
point.
if one store one time fails to put one 10-cent charge on one receipt, is that a violation? And should that cost them $150? That seems to me disproportionate.
Right, okay, remember it's waiver first, okay, so you get a
Warning
waiver, or a
first.
warning, so you get a warning,
I get
then
it,
a
but,
150, yeah.
I mean,
see what you're
I
saying.
can imagine,
Willful,
I'm just thinking like Stop and
behavior.
Shop is part of some national chain of Stop and Shop, right? And so they probably have, I'm making this up, right? But having worked in big organizations, right, their point of sale cash register systems are probably not something that they control. It's probably something that they get from the larger vendor, the regional or the national Stop and Shop. If we put a reporting requirement on their receipts that their national vendor
It's
can't
already on there.
handle,
It's already on there.
They're already doing it.
okay.
But
that just-
why do we care? Like, I mean, to be honest, like, I mean, I would think that the vendor would want to charge it. That's not what it's more if they're offering it, in my opinion. Are they offering these bags? Are there bags that are in compliance? If they are not in compliance, that's when you would charge.
Right, I'm just trying to figure out what is a violation.
Right,
So
but I
another
don't think
violation
we
could be,
should-
is the paper bag not
Yeah.
proper, doesn't have the proper composition?
Right, that's
Right.
what that would
That's a
charge. I don't
Is
think
that
we
a
should get
violation?
into,
Yeah.
I don't think we should get into, like, did they charge 10 cents?
10 is
Let them do that.
optional, like, it's not worded as optional, but it's,
No,
they can
it's,
charge, they don't, are they
No, I don't
forced
think
to
it should be
charge?
optional.
no, they're forced to.
We're trying to change
Yeah.
behavior.
No, I
right?
get it, so, because I remember when we were given the presentation before the holiday, I thought, one of the people presenting said that, and if somebody doesn't want to charge, like one of the stores said that they're not gonna charge their customers 10 cents for a bag, and.
No, that's why Palmer's is agreeing to this, because because otherwise Whole Foods wouldn't charge, right? And that would be a disadvantage to them.
Okay, I'm sorry,
So,
that I
yeah.
misunderstood something there.
Yeah, so no, it's a blanket. Okay, so everybody's okay?
I think Whole Foods would still be.
So I'm okay, I think
Yeah.
I'm okay with the fine structure,
Uh-huh.
right? It's a question of, as part of the enforcement language, defining what counts as violation, because I think we want to not be disproportionately harsh.
Well, and I think one of the things we need to think about is it a violation per person, per bag, per like individual thing that goes wrong in the transaction? If a customer takes 10 plastic bags, is that 10 violations? Or is it just one? And we
Well,
also have a limit
well,
of
David,
only
the
one violation per day.
The customer isn't gonna get 10 bags,
Yeah,
because
they
there aren't
won't.
gonna be 10 bags.
No,
So
but if
it's
they-
gonna be it'll be the organization that's getting fined.
No, I understand, but
transaction.
if the organization gives a
Oh.
customer 10 plastic shopping bags instead.
On January 2nd.
Right, is that 10 violations? Or is it one?
One violation.
Okay, but we need to write that in here.
That's what I'm saying.
Or per
I'm not in
transaction.
favor of
Correct.
any
And-
fine, unless everything is spelled out ahead of time so people know exactly what the game rules are.
Okay, so we're writing the game rules.
Right, and
So what
unless
are
we
the
have them
rules?
nailed out, I'm not in favor of any fine.
Okay, so we're nailing them
whatsoever.
down right now, Terry.
Yeah,
So we're gonna do fine,
Strap in.
we're gonna do fine per transaction.
Per
Per
transaction.
transaction, okay?
Should we say transaction, because transaction means like if 5 of us show up to shop and each one of us is given a bag that
Yep.
doesn't conform or we are not charged the 10 cents, then there are 5 violations which at 150.
You know what,
We're
we're not
getting
Yeah,
attorneys.
that's way ahead.
We're not attorneys,
Yeah.
let's just
I
get
don't
the,
wanna-
okay, so,
Yeah.
let's just get
No,
the
but
concept
what do we
down.
want? Yeah, the concept, conceptually.
Because we have somebody that's gonna worry about writing that little
Yes.
stuff. I'm not gonna
Yes.
worry about that
No.
right now.
But
Are we
conceptually-
per transaction?
No.
No,
I
I don't think
disagree
so either.
completely.
I don't
What
think
are
so.
we?
How are you gonna,
No.
you get a tip line and then there's,
Somebody's gonna sit there with
you're
a,
gonna end up being like, he said, she said,
That's
like,
I think we just
definitive
have
to
to-
me. To me, it's like if there is a complaint made against you and an officer shows up or somebody shows up to enforce and they find a problem, that one complaint, doesn't matter if you've sold 5 bags or 10 bags, is one complaint and it's 150 or 250.
Okay, so it's a
It's-
fine per complaint.
It's per,
A fine per visit by,
in the statute, it says per violation.
okay.
So we just have to
You have to
define
define
what a violation is.
What's a violation, you guys?
So a violation is the wrong composition of
right,
bags.
Plastic, giving out plastic instead of paper.
giving out plastic.
Right, well, that's the wrong
Well, we
composition.
know, we know what that is, but how are we're defining the timing of it. Is it when an officer goes, at the end of the day, the officer goes to the store and, or compliance person or whatever, and even if the store was messing up all day, is it one fine or is it per transgression?
Do you understand?
It's,
That's the tricky.
Can the
I don't
citation
think so. I
officer
think in
give
fact-
more?
I like, somebody said per day, I think in fact that makes sense, because you don't wanna be like giving somebody 5 tickets in a day.
no, there's again, I'm just citing this
No,
draft.
sorry.
Right.
But the draft can
The
be
draft
amended.
says, no, it says no more than 1 violation per day.
Right.
Okay,
So if they were giving out the wrong bag for a whole day to 300 customers,
okay.
it's 1 violation.
So are you good with how it reads?
I gotta go through this in more detail. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't come prepared
Okay, so,
to render every page of this.
okay, so, well, that's something that we have to answer, so
Okay.
why doesn't everybody take a look at it at your leisure, and, don't do a blanket email, just let me know. I can do that, right?
yes.
Okay, that's not a meeting, right?
Yes.
If I just take, okay,
Right.
No, if we're sending them all to you, it's
Yeah.
not
We
right.
can send anything to you.
okay.
Can't talk with all of us.
But in general, it just came down to per violation, and then you just define what a violation is
Okay,
and over what time
So
frame.
no matter how many things a store does wrong in a single day, there could only be 1 violation a day, so
That's
1
what
fine.
that's what this draft says,
Okay,
which
so
I think
is
makes
that what
sense. If somebody goes out and buys the wrong bags,
I'm still uncomfortable with it because of what just Patrick said, that if somebody goes by, if a small business owner goes by, trying to get a better deal and buys it from the wrong source and it's not in compliance, and they've been using it for 30 days, all of a sudden now they have 30 days of violation that has piled up. To me, every citation is a fine. If you're not cited or looked into, to me, that's where I get a little
I think the
uncomfortable with small
combination of their
businesses.
violation, it being reported, and their customer base putting pressure on them, I think eventually they're gonna get the idea. And if they
Well, I
don't,
think they'll get the idea immediately, but if I'm a business who has already got the idea and now I'm trying to shop around and get the best deal on my bags,
well, then you're taking business risk.
I get it, but every day is punitive. If for 30 days
But
you
it's
don't
supposed
catch
to be
it.
punitive.
No, but if for 30 days you don't catch the fact, like I didn't mean to buy the wrong bags, I genuinely thought that I'm getting the right bags. And then 30 days later you show up because your compliance officer is not going to show up every day and say these are not.
So,
So
I guess the point is
from
that
the point of
one
view-
visit to
Get
one
that one
violation
violation.
is 1 complaint, is 1 citation, and is 1 fine.
Are you suggesting they should be fined for each of the 30 days that they've been using
I'm
the
saying
wrong
they
bag?
shouldn't be.
Right.
No,
Right,
that's
we
what
all
we're all
agree.
That's what
agreeing.
we all
We're in
I know,
agreement.
but you said it was per day one.
So that's like saying
violation.
if I report on Monday that I got something at Stop and
So
Shop
it's
that's
a
not
public
compliance,
Okay,
right?
So
And
maybe-
the officer goes on Tuesday, that Tuesday would be one violation if it's confirmed.
agreed.
Then you went on Wednesday, now maybe.
I'm fine with
If
that.
they haven't corrected themselves
But they
by
have
the next
7
day,
days.
it's another
Absolutely,
violation.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Where they
It
got a
shouldn't be
warning on the
retroactive.
first
I guess
No,
you're
no,
concerned that the store owner fesses up and says, "Oh my God, I've been doing this for 6
30
months."
You better build me up.
I've been cramming it in his mouth of baby
I
otter.
think that business owner has worse things to think about. Things to think about.
Okay, there's another question.
I'm feeding it to my turtles.
Speaking of that, the penalty imposed by the officer shall be subject to the fine in the amount listed, da-da-da. No more than one penalty shall be imposed upon a business establishment within a blank period of time.
Sorry, what section are you looking at?
I'm
Seven.
looking at
Section 7.
So if they get a penalty on Monday, when's the next time, or they're cited for a violation on Monday, when's the next earliest time that they can be cited for a violation?
Do you want to give them a cure period, in other words?
Yeah.
Is it a week, is it
a bad
Oh.
2
spot.
weeks, is it?
I would say 7 days,
I like 7 days,
7 days.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
because they can get their custom bags fast tracked or by non.
Yeah,
Because
By
again, they all know that this is coming
Yeah,
now,
by
everyone should be
generic.
prepared. Right.
And again, there's an
Agreed.
appeal process.
7 days, I think.
Does anyone not agree with 7?
It's okay.
So you get a warning first,
You get a warning.
Morning first.
and then you get 7 days.
Yeah.
Then you get your first violation, and then you got 7 more days, and it goes to 250.
And you don't know how to run a business and you shouldn't be in business anyhow.
If those that are, you know, in small business, does that seem reasonable?
I think that's very fair, because, I mean,
And Patrick?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if you run out of bags, how quickly can you get new bags?
but you
Right.
can get generic bags,
No, I'm
Although we've given you 6 months.
yeah.
Right.
yeah,
I guess,
7 days should be.
I guess what we're
Amazon
trying to,
has
what we're
bags
trying to
always.
address here is the potential of just a flagrant violator, if someone says, I don't care,
Exactly.
I'm gonna give plastic bags out because my
That's
customers
right.
want it,
That's
and
right.
it's better for my business, and I like the branding,
Right.
and I'll eat the fine.
They line
How
their
much,
garbage cans with them.
yeah, how much fine am I, or should we be willing to put on them?
No, that's
And I think, okay, if that's their business position, I think $250
A
a
week.
week
It's
is,
$1,000 a month, basically.
will get their
That'll
attention.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we wanna make sure that we wanna disincentivize someone just flagrantly
Mhm.
disobeying.
Just to clarify, where does the fine go? To the state?
Goes into the, no,
The
goes
fine
to
goes to
us,
the town.
and it goes into a general
At the
fund.
moment, it goes to the town.
Right.
Not lockbox? Okay.
No.
So that could be used for like beautification commission and stuff
Mhm.
like that, okay.
Okay, so we're good on the warning, we're good on the 7 day, we're good on the 150 and the 250. Okay, the increase in the charge, that's a possibility, so there's an escalation.
Meaning the fee charged to
The
the
10 cent,
customer,
no,
that
the 10 cents,
Yeah,
to the
10 cents,
customer,
yes.
that the retail establishment
yes.
takes.
So we could, in my opinion, we are asking a lot of businesses, I think that they should be able to run their own business and they should be able to decide if they wanna raise their fee or not. How does everybody else feel?
So
I
we
don't
would
have a strong
establish
feeling
amount.
on that.
Okay.
I guess is the fees
What list?
mandated?
This is every year it goes up by a nickel, essentially?
No other, ordinance has that,
Right.
okay, except for Darien.
Well, and to your point before, talking about Palmer's and versus Whole Foods, the whole point is that this fee is mandated. Right, so I think it's not something that's discretionary as to how much an individual merchant wants to charge. We would be raising, we're not raising this for the entire pool of merchants in town. Am I understanding right?
Exactly.
Okay.
No, say that again, we would be.
Right.
Yeah, right, but everyone's gonna be in lockstep.
In sync, right,
Correct.
okay.
I guess my personal view is, I don't see a need for that, but because I guess previously, I agreed with the lead gentleman that I thought 10 cents was low, right? So I'd rather see a higher initial fee that's flat, instead of trying to finesse this and change it over time. Again, just for simplicity's sake.
Okay. So are
And also I
you,
think so I guess I'm against the escalator.
is anyone for the escalation?
My only concern is the cost of the bag. I mean, it's not a stagnant cost. The cost of bags is gonna change.
They can raise it
Could
themselves.
go up, could go down.
They could raise it themselves.
Okay.
But
They
I
could
think they're
raise-
gonna be saving money, cause I don't think people are gonna be using the bags, that's my own opinion.
Wait, are you saying that the store owner should be allowed to charge, if they want to take the fee from 10 cents to 15 cents, they could do that?
Sure, yeah, your store owner, you know.
I've got very special bags, so they're costing you
Yeah,
20
they do
cents.
that
not 10.
already, like you can buy a $1 bag or a $5 bag when you're shopping.
Yeah, it's
No, we're not talking about the reusable bags, we're talking about
The paper
the
bags.
paper bags.
That is subject to a fee.
But we
Yeah.
have no rules in place that says that they can't
No,
charge us
no,
for
no,
that,
no, it's
so.
a, it's
We're
a,
Tiffany, so our bags are worth more, you know, so we're charging you 20 cents.
So should the mandate
You can get away with
say
it.
a minimum 10 cent
Tiffany's
charge?
barbecue.
It does.
yeah, it says
That's a minimum,
Yeah.
so then right there, it says you
Yeah.
could have anything.
No, but the question is whether we want the ordinance to then mandate an escalation.
It would be the environmental charge shall be
Because we're
automatically
trying to change
increased by
behavior.
blank cents on every blank anniversary of the effective date.
In perpetuity, too. There's no sunset on that, so.
Yeah,
But to Rob's point, the costs are always going up, it seems.
Yeah, the business
You know,
owner has
inflation.
to manage that anyway.
But
at a minute.
but also as more manufacturers will be doing compliant bags, there will be more competition and hopefully that will bring.
It's like organic eggs, right? Look at the cost, how they came
and the
down.
store can always raise their, they can always charge more.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they used to,
Okay,
they used to
so-
be really expensive, now they're
Okay,
just,
so are we scratching this?
The escalation,
I think it's unnecessary.
Okay.
because you can do it.
Anyone for it? No, okay.
Monica, not that I wanna bring this up again, but did we ever really discuss like, the merchants' issues with, the composition of the paper bag?
We did discuss it under, the discussion was centered around giving them a longer period of time to
Source it.
dispose of what they have.
Okay.
And so the, David mentioned the January 1st, or Rolf had the 6-month minimum to January 1st. I personally would like to have 2 dates, and figure out the plastic thing, or give them a longer period of time to get rid of the bags.
But we're fundamentally okay with how the ordinance reads about
About the composition?
Yeah, the paper composition. I mean, because, the Darien Toy Box, gentleman, he says, that he gives out recycled or recyclable
Right.
bags, right? And so, my question, because I wasn't clear, I'm like, well, what's the difference between that and what's in the ordinance right now?
Okay, do you wanna look into that?
Yeah.
I can say that all of the ordinances that I've seen are across the board consistent on this, the composition,
Yeah, I'm sure that,
verbiage.
did their research and there's a reason for it, but I
Right.
just,
But
What
these
is the
are good
difference?
questions that, we're gonna be asked to justify why we stand where we do, and so if you wanna look into that would be great.
Sure.
That would be really helpful. Okay, so we're in pretty much agreement on the 10 cents, and everybody understands that this is not, town council's advice. Everybody understands that, okay. And the 12 mil is consistent all the way. The, Rolf has some concerns on the paper bag composition question, which Lindsay's gonna look into. So the, I did not think this would turn out to be, but it's the effective date thing we should nail down. So let's take a vote. It's, one concept is Rolf's, which is 6-month minimum, or January 1st. Or David's idea of just January 1st, no matter where it falls. Is that how you feel? I mean, if we pass this in September, are you good with January 1st?
No, I like Rolf's idea.
So you want a 6-month minimum?
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine.
Yeah, the later of 6 months or January 1st.
Yeah.
Right. Does everyone agree
I
with
want
that?
March 1st.
Okay. March 1st, okay. Everybody else?
I like the cleanliness of the first, but I tend to agree with you because you're gonna have some carryover with, I think February 1st, but March is a little, because there's a quarter beginning rather than February, which is kind of weird with school vacations
And
and
let
whatever.
the poor retailers breathe a little. I mean, just, I feel bad about the fact that they get slammed, and January is when they,
Yeah,
you know,
and-
take
But-
inventory.
But you're assuming they're not gonna do anything until January first,
They got time to,
you know?
prepare.
No, I'm not assuming that. To be fair, what I'm saying is, if you're a store that has 5,000 bags, for example, sitting, and every year you have between 4,000 to 6,000 bags that you go over that period, you've done your inventory in September, and here on that cusp, you either have to outlay the extra money and do the research in September to order the bags, or you'll pay a premium to get it rushed when you need it. I just feel that given the fact that some of the merchants have spoken up about this, it might be a goodwill gesture more than anything else, because really, there's not a whole lot of shopping also that happens. And anybody, like whether, or maybe we do it January 1st with a 60-day,
Grace period.
yeah, exactly, something so that we can have the clean first. But I just feel, it feels a little harsh to, like, I know as a small business, when I get slammed, even that 10-minute thing is a little overwhelming. So, this is a big expensive item for a lot of businesses clearly.
And you know,
Maybe
we,
January 1 with a 30-day grace.
with a 30.
30-day grace, so there's no enforcement in the first 30 days, but the law's in effect.
And this may be a little bit fluid. We have to hold another hearing anyway. Right?
Right.
And so once this draft comes out, if
We'll have more.
we maybe we can find a way to encourage the chamber, and we can encourage many of the business owners to really, you know, give us their input on what the implementation period ought to be, and what the, you know, on certain facets where they feel that they're getting slammed on it.
Okay, why don't we canvass the merchants ourselves?
Well, we can do that too.
Okay.
But
Well,
who are you gonna talk to? Are you
Yeah,
talking
right.
to the decision maker, you know, you're not gonna just talk to the person
Like the
who's.
cashier.
Okay, let me think about this.
Yeah.
I mean, look, just I think we can go to the chamber and say,
Yeah,
Ask-
she
ask
was
your
the first
members.
one up
Yeah.
yesterday,
Right.
and she ran out of time. She was just
Right. She was
getting
getting
going, and then it was
started,
like, time's up.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
she
I
should have
felt
had
So,
more
I-
time.
yeah, I don't think you
Yeah.
really
No,
got a chance
I think it's
to-
another way of reaching. I'm sorry, Liz. It's another way of reaching out and trying to, you know, extend an olive branch to
Yeah.
say what's going to work. If the train's coming down the track,
Right,
you know,
right.
Would
what's
this
Good point.
be a, would this
you
be?
How
want
hard
to
do you
stop
want
here,
to
or do you
do
want
it?
to stop here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was checking out of Stop and Shop this evening, and the store manager was working the cash register, and I asked him about the bag. I said, you know, what is Stop and Shop doing in, you know, how big a transition would this be for you? He goes, oh, we're already doing it in Westport. It was like, I mean, really, he sort of was like, no brainer. I mean, like, the system's in place, we'll just do it that way.
Yeah, see, I think
And they're
we
gonna
have,
be doing it in Sanford and Norwalk before they have to do it here too.
yeah.
So
We have-
remember, we're gonna be at the tail end of a lot of the enactment of this, so this is gonna be easy for the larger stores.
We have two, we
I'm
have
not worried
two,
about the largest.
we have
Yeah,
two
no, I think
segments.
we are all
You
concerned
guys,
about
we have
this.
two segments. We have the grocery stores and CVS and those stores that do a much higher volume in plastic bags, let's put it that way. And then we have the other question, which is the merchants and the paper bag and the paper bag composition. So how do we, this ordinance is to get you to bring your own bag, right? And to reduce the number of the flimsy bags that are out there, right? This isn't the Helen Ensign bag, okay? So how do we keep those people happy and also achieve the reduction of the flimsy bags, which is really, I think, what we're trying to accomplish.
But wouldn't
And-
Helen Anson's garment bags fall within the dry
Yeah,
cleaner
but David,
exception?
when's the last time you bought a dress? Okay?
Okay.
Okay, it's been a long time.
Point taken.
Okay, So to
It's kind
your
of personal, I
point,
mean, maybe it's a freaky
so
shopper.
to your point, I'm not, if I'm going to buy a dress, I don't have a bag that, I'm going to wanna roll my dress up in and put it in,
Right.
okay? So these stores have a different kind of problem, and I think we have to recognize
Right,
that.
my question is, doesn't Helen Anderson already fall into the exemption for
In the safe
for
bag
dry cleaner
area,
bags?
yeah.
For garment bags, for large
Well,
clothing
maybe
bags?
we can change the definition to make sure that it does.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I
Dry
didn't
cleaner
quite
bag
get her
includes
opposition, or their
garment
opposition.
bags.
I think the exemption only applies to dry cleaners.
Right.
Okay,
So she's not a
So-
dry cleaner, she's selling new material, she's a
Mhm.
retailer.
But
Yeah.
instead,
But-
if we put in when you were talking about it, I was thinking, what if there was an exception, to the whole, that it's the 1st of January deadline for everybody who uses more than 5,000 bags a month, or some number that makes it very clear that we don't care about the small businesses who are trying to finish off that inventory, or, that could be a
So
pretty
it could
good,
be,
nice
it could
gesture
be
to the
number of
pa-
bags, it could be square footage. I've seen somewhere, I saw some ordinance, it was 10,000 square feet. So it
But then Walmart, CVS and Walgreens are not necessarily,
well, right. I mean, what we're trying to do is mostly the grocery stores, am I correct?
well,
Even
take out food
pharmacy-
places probably
pharmacy.
aren't that large,
Yeah, that's a
and
good
they have a lot of plastic bags.
True.
yeah, so I
Very
think
true.
it's the volume per, because we are concerned about volume, if you're not using more than 5,000 or whatever that number makes sense to everybody, bags a month, then you have another 45 days to comply or whatever, and.
I still think that we're getting a little bit down in the weeds,
Yeah.
because I think, maybe this is just stuck in my mind, if we have a way for them to appeal, and they've got plenty of time to appeal, that not that they don't ever have to comply with the law, but implementation and some way to say, look, I've got 2 years worth of these, is there any way that I can either pay a fee to the town for the right to continue to use these so I don't get slammed, and/or I need an extra 3 months.
But who are they appealing to, and how is the appeal judgment being
The
made?
process that we set up, there will be an appeal officer, whoever the officer is, or the body that's going to hear the violations.
Well, the
You-
devil's in those details.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
I
I agree- I
can stop
agree.
a big box store from just deciding it's cheaper for me to buy an exemption than it is to comply.
Yeah, but it's still up to the hearing officer to say no.
We just,
Well,
really
the
just
spirit
of the
talk
law
about
says
that.
this.
I
Yeah,
mean,
we just put
you gotta be
garment.
careful
I just-
about that, where it
Yeah.
sounds so
Yeah.
discretionary.
I mean, look, like,
Putting
I mean,
energy
if you put in dry cleaner that includes garment bag, I mean, those are really large,
Yeah.
tend to be pretty large bags,
Right.
But in an upscale town like ours, it's going to be Brooks Brothers, and it's going to be Helen Anson, it's gonna be
Yeah.
the Darien Sports Shop, anybody who's buying, luxury goods.
It's not, yeah,
Right.
it's not the garment bag, it's
yeah.
this bag that they're concerned about.
well, yeah, no, and, okay, so my point is that if I'm buying a $2,500 dress, it better be in a cloth bag.
Right.
But,
And it will be, and that is by definition exempt, so
Yeah.
that wouldn't count.
Right.
It's these bags that, there've been an investment made, or Diane Brown? I think it's Diane Brown. The caterer has a big inventory in her basement, and at the store, but she said that if she was to buy the bags that are compliant, she'd have to buy a much bigger, have a much bigger order, and she doesn't even have room to store that many bags, so it's, okay, so let's keep thinking, okay. Okay,
but you did say that you've seen an ordinance that said, something.
I saw it somewhere,
something
yeah,
like,
yeah.
if you're giving out less than X amount of.
It was by square footage of the establishment,
I don't know if that would.
yeah,
Yeah,
Every
I
time
think
you
for
take out
Darien, the
places
number
there,
of
yeah.
bags makes
Right.
more sense to me than square footage.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
But how do
'cause-
you monitor that,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, I don't think we're gonna go in and see if it's 5,010 bags versus,
How
but
are you gonna
if,
see how you gonna count the 5,000?
Right.
You're
It's
gonna
like
take
an
somebody's
honor
word
system
for
at
it.
that point, right?
No, we only did 250.
Right.
How many transactions do you do
How
a
many
month?
ba-
It's
how
none of your
many-
business.
no, but here's
It's
the
between
thing.
me and the IRS.
No, really. They don't have to tell you how many transactions they do. They don't have to tell me how many customers coming in and out. I mean, we have to be very
Then let's
careful
just do
about
the
getting
60 days, like I was
too far into
originally
these
saying,
businesses.
give them an
Right.
extra 60 days to comply, and then we are done. And it's for everybody. The idea was to try and stop and shop and the pharmacies 2 months in advance on that clean January 1st day. So it's like, we have to pick something. Again, we have to pick one of the evils as far as the Chamber of Commerce is concerned. Something's gonna come down. The question is, can we sweeten it a little bit and show a good faith?
Well, I don't know that we wanna do that at the outset. I propose putting in the January 1 date, maybe with a 30-day grace, and let them come back to us and negotiate. If they think that's not
We should
sufficient.
hear from them, what
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
works for them.
I'm absolutely good with that.
Okay. Is everyone good with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good solution.
Can you repeat it
Think
as best you
about it.
can?
January 1st is the effective date, and a 30-day grace period
From January 1st?
from January 1st.
So I guess in the period from January 1st to January 31st, 2020, they'll only be issuing warnings,
Right.
right?
That's
Okay.
their grace period.
But that's the grace period, so if someone's doing something wrong, we should give them the courtesy / information that you are doing something wrong, and the officer or whoever is gonna be enforcing this comes to your store and says, hey, you're doing something wrong, and we wanna let you know. So you might get 2 warnings, 3 warnings, 4 warnings in January, you're not gonna get any fines. Come February 1, okay, well, we're 7 days from your last warning,
It's showtime.
now, if you're still in violation, then you're gonna get a citation, and you're gonna get written up, and you're gonna get a fine according to the schedule. Right?
And that January 1st is regardless of when it's approved by the RTM.
But we said the later of January
Yeah,
1st or
so
6
it's
Six
months.
months will still be
Yeah,
there?
the 6
Okay.
month will still be there, I think
Very
that's
good.
a good suggestion.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I agree with that.
Okay.
Aspirationally, we hope to have this.
Rolf,
passed.
you're taking minutes. What are you doing? Are you, did
It's
you
got,
write that
it's got
down?
all right here.
Okay.
Okay, so it's 6, okay, so it's 6 months.
Go to the videotape.
Ralph's gonna spend a lot of time with
I have
TV
something
79
here
already.
Okay, so what did we come up with? We have 6 months,
Yeah,
work,
6 months from the RTM approval.
January 1st or 6
1st,
months, whichever's
with a 30-day, what do we call it? The
Grace
30-day
period. Warning only.
With a 30-day grace period.
okay, sound right?
Yeah.
Sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, guess what? We accomplished so much. Okay, does anyone else have anything else to add?
I have one issue that was raised to me just today by someone who's involved in this. And that apparently there's some thought afoot that this ordinance should somehow be divided into 2. That you have the plastic bag ban in the first step, and then a second ordinance mandating paper, or mandating the fee, mandating the 10-cent fee. I think that's a terrible idea.
I think it's a terrible idea.
So, but I want to raise that there is discussion of that, at least in some circles, that maybe this should be divided into 2, phase in the plastic bag ban first, and the 10-cent fee later. I think that defeats the whole purpose of this, because it's to change behavior.
I agree.
But I just thought I'd put
Well,
that on people's radar screens.
I think that's been floated because there is a fear that if we put this all together, it'll get shot down in the RTM. And so if it's divided, we have a better chance of getting something. That, I think, is the thought process behind that.
But then if we split it 1 Palmer's, then back out the whole reason why they are on board is the 10-cent fee,
Right.
so I'm like, it's
Yeah.
like now we are just chasing.
Right,
Well,
chasing
Palmer's
the tail.
is one, is a very clearly an icon in town and is very important, but it is one establishment.
And it was a
Yeah.
primary opponent of the Choose to
Which
Reuse
is
effort
why
in
it
2012, and
lasts.
one of the
Yeah.
main reasons it failed.
Yeah,
It was the reason, is what
Right.
it, yeah.
And a thought on that, because when we were talking about enforcement and maybe not looking over their receipts, but to Palmer's defense, they're gonna wanna know
Right.
that this is being enforced. And so that's, again, just throws the question mark of how you do that.
Yeah, if you have an ordinance, you have to have enforcement.
Yeah, well, yeah, just about like, you know,
That
the
is gonna
charge.
be the biggest bone of contention in the entire RTM meeting. How's it enforced? How
Yeah.
are the fines handed out? That will be 90% of the
And
discussion.
who's responsible for doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
that
our-
has to be vetted out ahead of time, or we're in for a 3-hour meeting and it'll get
And we'll
nowhere.
get nowhere.
But this committee, at least now, has agreed that this ordinance should not be split in 2, right?
I agree.
I agree.
Okay.
But it may get split in 2 by
I don't
somebody on the
think-
RTM with an amendment.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
possible.
But I would say, before this goes to the floor of the RTM, that the mechanics of the enforcement has the support of the First Selectman's office to assign and implement the manpower needed to get it done, because it's not site visits are time consuming.
Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying, but respectfully, the first selectman's office does not get a veto on our legislation.
I'm just saying.
However,
how
We want them to
will
be
it
partners.
Of course.
yeah, but however, the first selectman could, or any first selectman could decide not to enforce.
That's true with any law.
I know, that's my
Right.
point.
That's what the Justice Department's doing with the marijuana laws in Colorado and all these
Exactly.
other states that have legalized
Yes.
it now. They've
So
just
what-
decided not
so
to
I-
enforce federal law.
I get
But we
that.
can't
So-
deal with that. We can only, we're the
Yeah.
legislative body.
I understand that, but it's better to have everybody pulling the oars in the same direction. And if we can do it in a way that everybody is in agreement, then we should try and do that.
Yeah, I just don't want the conversation
I
to be
completely agree with you,
hijacked
Liz.
and get derailed.
Yes.
And, we're over here, the shiny penny, and we're not getting the main job done, so.
Right.
And
Right.
we can't add to the budget, we can only vote on what's presented to us. So we can't say, hey, we wanna put 5-10 grand in here and there. So we have to have that, you know.
I concur.
Right.
That's not
Yeah.
our,
So we
that's
can't
not our responsibility.
say we're gonna fund this, we have to have
Right.
it.
But again, we've seen the outpouring of public
Yes,
support
yeah,
for
but I'm just
this.
saying
Right.
So
mechanically,
I,
we
Right.
can't.
I think,
And that's what it's gonna
I
come
think
down to.
the first
Appropriate
selectman's
the money.
office will take note of that, I hope.
Yeah.
But isn't the RTM gonna wanna know in executing the administration of the regulations, if you will, that there is gonna be some cost associated with that, and aren't they gonna wanna have that quantified in some way, shape, or form?
Yes.
And
As a
that's-
member of the RTM, yes, I would.
Okay,
Yeah.
I mean,
so
I
we have to
know-
be prepared with that, no?
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or
Yes.
form?
There were arguments over $7,000 for garbage pickup at the beach that was debated on endlessly, whether or not we're gonna keep them for 7 days a week or 4 for $7,000. So it will be discussed. And people will have issues with it, and some people won't. So that has to be nailed down, to Liz's point. You gotta get all those mechanics nailed down so that it's straight out there.
And how do we do that?
Well, we've got to work with, this is not just our committee, TGSNA has to work through these mechanics as well to help us out. We've done a pretty good amount of heavy lifting here, so, and everybody else who's working in the various committees around town is as well, so everybody come up with their ideas.
I overheard, did they have a meeting tonight too? If they
Uh,
did, what are they talking about?
TGSNA, they're doing what we're doing.
Oh, so, and then we come together and.
I was just gonna say, are we gonna,
Yeah,
We
when
could
do we
if you
meet again?
want, we could have a joint meeting.
Mhm.
It's
They
a
asked
little
about it
unwieldy.
today and I was like, no, I think I just want our committee just to get.
So can I humbly suggest if you and, is Frank's the chair, if you and Frank get together and say, here's where we're in agreement, here's what, like, if you guys can get together and like do a quick digest, and this is not again, having a meeting online, but just say, hey, we met and we compared our notes and we are in agreement on 75% of the stuff, here's where we all agree, boom, 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 and our points of disagreement are, the fee or not a fee, escalation or not escalation, and, enforcement processes. So we're gonna have a joint meeting in another 2 or 3 weeks, call a special meeting, right? And let's talk about where we are divergent or things that haven't yet been hammered out.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Frank will no doubt have a number of constructive suggestions to kind of fill all the gaps.
I can tell you that we're about 85%. I can tell you right off the top of my head.
Great, so I think that's all good news.
That's
Right.
right.
Good, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
think
it
this
sounds
one's
like we
a
should be shooting for the April meeting, if
Yeah.
we're that close.
Yeah, you know what? I know we've spent a lot of time on this, but like Terry said, we've done the heavy lifting and, we've answered questions. What was the question that I wanted you all to let me know on? You were all gonna come back to me.
How we're
yeah,
gonna do the enforcement?
wording needs to be in the ordinance that
What's a
count-
violation? What?
Yeah, what constitutes a store violation? Committee members to email thoughts to Monica.
Okay. You're hired. We're giving you a raise.
But I don't think we've answered the question of how, the other part of the heavy lifting is how this is going to be implemented. I mean, what is the,
And the whole public
Who-
awareness, educational component.
well, yeah, that too, but where is this going to reside? At what department within the town hall is going to have responsibility for implementing this ordinance? and how is it going to be implemented?
So
To me,
let's just talk through
that's
what we've
the-
agreed, right? Because we've already agreed that we have defined what the merchants have to do, right? I think we've pretty clearly, like, as far as when bags go and what gets replaced and all that stuff, right? And the goal is to get rid of all bags. We've said that we're not gonna have people like going out, like Inspector Javert to check on people. It's gonna be a tip line to say, hey, store,
Right.
Helen Ainton is still using bags that are non-compliant, and so we need somebody to go investigate that. Right. My expectation was that because we are Public Works and we are the lead on this, that it would be the Public Works Department that would go out to check that. Maybe that's not a good model. I mean, I don't know that you can use the blight model because the blight is more buildings kind of thing. Right.
And more contentious in many ways, because real property generates a lot of contention.
But this could be, the environmental, I've forgotten the name of the commission.
EPC?
The EPC could be empowered to do the, but I
That's
think,
like planning
that has to come, this is where First Selectman's office, since that's where the appointments to these commissions come from, maybe that's where we seek the cooperation and say, how can we do this in the most cost effective and efficient way to do it?
Here's Joel.
Hey, Frank.
Yes.
Public invited?
Always.
How are you? How'd you do?
We had a good meeting.
Good. We are just finishing up. Okay, so how do you propose that we proceed? Terry?
I think that yourself and Frank, not volunteering you, but you're the chairs, reach out to the selectmen and first selectwoman and get their input, as this is where we are. We think it's moving down this direction. What would be your thoughts? How would you handle it? How would you like to see it? And get some feedback on that and get some direction.
Yeah, what the most appropriate department would be for oversight. I mean, in the case of blight, it went to,
Went to the fire marshal.
it's actually a fire marshal
Yeah.
is reassigned his
Right.
time to work there. So, Public Works seems like it could be an appropriate place. But they certainly have a big staff.
Let's not rule out of one of the commissions too.
Yeah.
Or a
We
commission,
empower,
absolutely, yeah, I mean.
one of the commissions
I'm
is
agnostic
empowered
on
to
it.
do that.
Beautification.
Beautification would be actually a perfect.
Well, they just
Or
reduce.
or
I mean, they're
environmental.
generally gardeners, but, this would be kind of a broadening of their scope, but, it certainly would seem to fall within.
But this is definitely
Something they would be
the
interested in.
EPC, you know.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It would be great to have a group that has already has the incentive to want this to happen. I mean, if you're just
Yes.
asking an employee to do it,
Yes.
you might not get the same get up and go.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And I think my own belief is that it has to be either a commission or, it can't be a volunteer group.
Right.
Okay.
BYO or,
Yeah, it should be
with no
somebody
disrespect to
vested with
any of them, I
town
think it has to have regulatory teeth.
Does everyone, what are your thoughts on not a volunteer group?
Agree.
But didn't we say that anybody could give that information?
But citizens can come
No,
forward.
it's the-
and
It's
register
the
a
enforcement
complaint.
side of it.
Agreed.
Yeah, so
Yes.
anybody can call into the tip line, right?
Right.
But then who goes to investigate and write a citation? I agree, it's gotta be someone whose primary allegiance and responsibility is to the town and enforcing the town's rules, and not to any other organization or to whatever their personal
Authorized by the town.
agenda might be.
What do you think,
So-
Terry?
I strongly don't want to incur any more FTEs, so the most ways we can do it, if we can do it at, voluntary as well as commission basis, like leave the door open a little bit and not get boxed in. So I would consult with them first, see what they come back with, and then comment on it. It's kind of hard to
Okay.
speak on something.
It's also something that can change, right?
Yes.
Right.
If we
Yeah.
find that there's a lot of violation, then we've got to, we go back and amend
And
the,
address it.
amend the ordinance and move it to the appropriate spot.
Does anyone else have any thoughts tonight? No? I want to say thank you again to Frank for taking the minutes last night, and thank you all for taking the minutes tonight.
Last night's
Wait, you're not,
clerk duties were so well handled. I was sitting up there next to the recording you were recording secretary?
I think I'm a clerk.
Very patient man and very good
Did a
about all
great
that.
job.
Thank you. The notes that were given to you when people spoke and they gave you a copy of their remarks?
Only 2 or 3 people gave me copies of that. I am gonna scan that, and Monica, when I send you my draft, I'm gonna attach the scans of
Okay.
the things that I
Perfect.
received.
Yes.
So you'll have all those independently.
Yeah, that's great, because as of 6 o'clock tonight, everybody who has written a email to the email port, Gary and RTM, all those messages are now up on the cloud. And so I would like to complete that by putting up the other ones in there.
Right, the comments.
And so as the messages come in until March 1st, when they come in, we'll put them up.
Yeah, again, as soon as I get this draft done for you, I will include all the stuff that,
Yeah.
and I have it here, it's just scannable.
No, all good, all good.
That'll be by midnight?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Midnight in Paris, so. Yeah.
Okay, does anyone else have anything? No?
Move to adjourn?
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, meeting adjourned.